Hi everyone, welcome back. Today we're making a low carb recipe or no carb recipe. I don't know if it's pronounced keto, but it is one of those things. Normally I make this with shrimp, but I didn't have any shrimp and I did have some chicken breast on hand instead, so I thought it would taste good with chicken breast as well. The shrimp version will be lower in cholesterol. But this one is very good too. So, first thing you're going to do if you're making it with shrimp is to peel the shrimp and stick them off to the side. For the chicken version, I am just cutting them into bite-sized pieces. Then you're going to take 2 cloves of garlic and mince that. As you'll see, I have a bunch of tiny little cloves, so I'm doing quite a few pieces of garlic. I forgot to mention that the shrimp should be 1 pound, and if you're using chicken, 1 breast is sufficient. So then peel the garlic and mince that, and then add that to the bowl with the shrimp once that's done. Now we're going to add the juice and oil and spices. So you're going to add 3 tablespoons of lime or lemon juice. I always use lemon because I keep it in my house as a pantry or fridge staple. So I always have this around because I use it in quite a lot of recipes. And most recipes that call for lime juice can be substituted with lemon juice without any major change in the taste. And then we're going to add 1 teaspoon of salt, and then 1 teaspoon of black pepper. I never know how much I'm doing when I grind my pepper, so I'm doing it quite a lot just because I'm estimating on that teaspoon. And then a half teaspoon of cayenne powder. And 1 teaspoon of paprika. You also need a half teaspoon of cumin, but I was completely out. So I looked online and I found that, is it coriander? Coriander is a good substitute, so I did a half teaspoon of that instead. And honestly, I didn't notice a difference. I've made this before with shrimp several times, and one reason that we like it in my house is because it's really spicy, and my husband loves spicy food. Then we're going to add 1 tablespoon of olive oil. Then you're going to mix all that really well and set it aside. The reason we're doing the spices and meat first is because you kind of do need it to marinate for a little bit. Not overnight, certainly, but you do want the spices to get into the muscles. So we're going to take one red bell pepper, and is it dice? Yes. I'm always trying to remember the difference between dice and mince. Mince is a smaller piece of cutting. So we're going to dice one red bell pepper and put that in a separate bowl. And then the recipe calls for 2 zucchini and 2 yellow squash. I have 1 zucchini and 1 squash, and the reason I don't have the proper quantity is because my friend gave me the pepper, zucchini, and squash, and I knew exactly what to make with it. She was giving away produce. She sometimes has extra, and I was like, oh yeah, I know exactly what to do, which is also why I didn't have any shrimp, because I wasn't planning for this recipe. I like to make my zucchini small, just to make them a little more bite-sized, so I'm going to put them, cut them into circles or coins or whatever, and then quarter those coins. So here is the squash my friend gave me, and I was quite flabbergasted. First, I asked her, "Oh my God, what happened to it?" And she said, "It's just a big squash." And I was like, "All right, a very big squash. Maybe it's an imperfect food situation. I don't know." She does a lot of homeless outreach, so she sometimes gets food for really cheap, and then if she has too much, she gives me some. So I was just trying to cut it up like a regular squash, and I thought something's wrong with this. It's way too hard, but that's not unusual. She sometimes gives me food that has gone bad on the inside, but not on the outside, so you can't tell. Typically oranges. Every time I get an orange from her, it's garbage. It's dried out. It's like eating, I don't know, shredded paper. So I don't eat the oranges she gives me anymore. I have to stop getting oranges from her. So I was like trying to figure this out, and I looked on the sticker. I pulled the sticker off before I brought it on camera. So I went back to the trash and looked at the sticker and said, "Oh my God, it says spaghetti squash." I thought I was gonna have to look up the grocery store name and like the code. So then I looked up online how to cut spaghetti squash, and it said, like this one video said, to get a towel and then kind of go like this from the middle all the way around, and that was still really hard. And I have mentioned before, I don't have the most upper body strength, but I can usually cut my food fine. It's more like lifting heavy things is a problem. So I was like cursing this woman out, even though she gave me free food. I was like, "How dare you give me some random ass squash that doesn't make any sense? And why is it spaghetti squash? I don't know how to cook this." And so I was like having a not a panic attack for sure, but a frustrated moment going, "What am I going to do with this? I don't even know if this will work with this recipe." And I was determined to figure it out and make it work. So the video I saw that said to use the towel and cut it in half didn't mention you're supposed to cook it first. So if you want to do it the right way, you'll cook your spaghetti squash at 425 for 5 minutes, and then you will take it out and let it cool, and then you will cut it down the middle. Duh! It will be a lot softer. And then you will scoop out the seeds and the flesh, or not the flesh, whatever the inside of it is, the seeds, and this part definitely looks like spaghetti. I was like, okay, well, this is how it got its name. All the garbage in here that we're throwing out is spaghetti. So I'm scooping that out, and then you put it back in the oven at 425. The time you leave it in there depends on whether or not, like, depends on the size. I didn't realize that at the time. I started cutting it up thinking, oh, I'll make some little medallions and cut those into quarters like I did with the zucchini, because that's what I normally do with the regular squash, whatever regular squash is called, yellow squash. If you're using yellow squash like you're supposed to for this recipe, you would have cut it up exactly like the zucchini and moved on. You would not have taken 30 minutes or more to figure out this whole spaghetti squash situation. So I'm kind of still trying to figure out what to do. I ended up looking up a different thing online because the lady's video about how to cut it didn't mention it's going to still be hard and you have to cook it. Like, that was not even part of her video. How dare you give me incomplete information, lady? So I found a website that said cook it at 425, cut it in half, spray the bottom, like the opening, with olive oil or any kind of spray just to keep it from sticking and burning. And then stick it at 425 in the oven for like up to 25 minutes depending on size. So I said, let me do that, and that is coming up soon. So once you finish cutting your vegetables, go ahead and take a large skillet, spray some nonstick spray in it, and then put all the vegetables in, and then let that cook a little bit. I would say do medium heat. Let's see if the recipe says anything. Nope, just says cube the vegetables and cook until soft. So medium heat should be safe, especially if you are like me and using spaghetti squash and you have to wait a long time for your spaghetti squash to cook. Go ahead and watch the vegetables, and if it starts to get brown and charred like my zucchini is, you can lower the heat and maybe cover it so that it's not cooking as fast. So now we're going to stick the spaghetti squash in the oven. As I mentioned earlier, I have it at 425. And I'm going to be cooking it for 20 minutes because I kind of estimated that mine was a big spaghetti squash. And also I wanted it to be soft. The recipe said, don't overcook it, it'll be too soft. And I thought, how is that possible? Like, I need it to be soft like these vegetables will be. So for my recipe, if you're using spaghetti squash, I don't think it'll matter if it's quote unquote too soft. Once the vegetables are cooked, transfer them to a separate bowl. If you're using spaghetti squash, I think I would recommend that you cook it first before you even start marinating and cutting up the meat. Just because I feel like it would just go faster. You wouldn't have to stand around waiting for stuff to finish cooking, and then you also wouldn't have to worry about overcooking the vegetables. If you're doing spaghetti squash, you don't need to add it to the skillet with the other vegetables either because it'll cook in the oven. Now, go ahead and add the chicken or shrimp to the skillet, including all of the sauce. It's going to be pretty liquidy. If you're doing shrimp, don't cook them for too long. So the recipe says 4 minutes on each side before you add the vegetables. So if you're doing shrimp, be very careful and pay attention and be very diligent about flipping them on time. Chicken, it needs to cook a little bit longer than shrimp. You're going to want to cook both on low heat. The chicken, if you're doing a chicken breast, that meat tends to need lower heat compared to dark chicken meat. So that's why I recommend keeping it on low. It keeps it from cooking too fast and kind of drying out. This is a 5 times sped up video of the chicken cooking. Now add the vegetables and cook for 1 to 2 more minutes. Do not overcook the shrimp if you are using it. Be very diligent about that, especially if you plan on having leftovers. Microwaved shrimp cooks additionally, so it's going to be fine probably the first time around, and then when you go to make leftovers and heat up in the microwave, the shrimp are going to get a little bit overcooked, so be careful about that. All right, my squash is done in the oven. I did char it a little bit, and this is the first time I've ever touched spaghetti squash. I may have eaten it at someone else's house at one point, but this is the first time I've actually touched it, seen what it looked like, and cooked, and it's insane. It takes so long. So anyway, after it comes out of the oven, you're supposed to take a fork and scrape out the flesh from the insides. And I have no idea how to tell when you're finished, so I think I left too much squash meat on the skin, I guess, whatever the outside of it's called. I guess it's the skin. So yeah, you just take a fork and you just go to town. You'll have all these little short strands of squash. I'm throwing it in the skillet or wherever all the food is. I don't remember if I put it in a skillet or a bowl off camera. And there's all these tiny little bunches of squash on the fork. And that's what it looked like when I was finished, and I ended up trying to put a little bit more in the skillet just because I didn't want to waste it, but I also didn't know how much to go, and it was taking forever, and I wasn't expecting to have to take this long to cook this. I was starving to death when this was done. But it actually was a very good addition, just as good as regular yellow squash. There was no unusual flavor. The spaghetti squash apparently is very bland, just like regular squash. So please like, share, and subscribe if you found this video interesting. It was delicious. I will make it again, but probably with regular squash now that I know what a spaghetti squash looks like, because that was a pain. Thank you.